Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Mike is sadly busy this week, so we got a couple videos in, but wanted to make sure we kind of kept up with content. And to be honest, today was actually supposed to be a video talking about X-Men: Age of Revelation. Um, but I'll be honest and frank, the tie-ins for that have been so bad, even by 2020's X-Men standards. It just wasn't a fun video to discuss. I don't have a problem being negative, but in all honesty, at a certain point, it just becomes destructive to do that. And so there's plenty of places if you want to get breakdowns on why I don't think those are working, you can go to. And so trying to pivot to something a little more positive. And, I was thinking the other day, me and Mike have done these videos talking about great comic book characters. And me and him both have our favorites. He's a huge Flash fan. I'm a huge Batman fan. On the Marvel end, he's a huge Thor fan. I'm a huge Wolverine fan. But there is one superhero, and even in my toddler's room where I'm kind of make most of these, you can kind of see on the wall in the back, there is one superhero who essentially is more popular than everybody else, and that's Spider-Man. And it's so interesting when you look at Spider-Man in that from a sales data standpoint in terms of merchandise just across the board, he, far and just out of this world sells over every other superhero in terms of his video game appeal, his cartoon appeal, his movie appeal. Batman's the closest, but in all honesty, if you kind of look at data and even stuff like Google searches, Spider-Man is just far and away the most popular superhero character. And so I thought, you know, why is that the case? How did Peter Parker, a character who was created 20 or so years after Batman and Superman, and obviously, they had a 2 decade head start to build legends and stories and fans. How did Spider-Man become far and away the most popular character and really become the reason that Marvel is more popular than DC? And I think I can obviously trigger that to a ton of things at Marvel, but the singular biggest reason that Marvel as a brand is popular is Spider-Man. Yes, the X-Men have helped and all that, but the brand that has carried Marvel Comics is Spider-Man. And looking at the character, look, I love Spider-Man, probably my fourth or fifth favorite superhero. One of the only consistent ones that I essentially always have the book on the pull list and read. If you really look at why, I think it kind of boils down to three things that make Spider-Man unique and make him the most popular superhero. And I think overall, the most important one, I think, for Spider-Man is his origin story and how relatable it is. And that kind of sounds ridiculous because it's obviously a superpowered world and an irradiated spider bites him. But Spider Man's origin story has nothing to do with the spider bite. The reason he is the superhero Spider Man has almost nothing to do with how he acquires his powers. And I think that basis that Ditko and Lee created with Peter Parker, in that his origin story as a superhero is his own mistake. I think one of the coolest things about Peter Parker that differentiates him from Clark Kent, from Bruce Wayne, from Steve Rogers, Reed Richards, any of the comic book characters that are very popular or were popular or created these brands is Peter's mistake is his own, and what makes him a superhero is his own failings, not something tragic that happens to him. I think one of the craziest things is if you look at most of the superheroes, a little bit of why some of them can be unrelatable at times is they inherently come across as like better people than most of us would be, right? And there's an aspirational element to that that makes us connect to those heroes and want to read them. It's one of the reasons I love Batman so much as a character, as I do see him as an aspirational character. But I think, with those characters you have where Superman's entire world is destroyed, Batman's parents are killed. You have, the Hulk is, it has a bomb blow up and he gets hunted and he's a monster. The Fantastic Four go to space and are radiated with rays. But almost all of those characters, when they get their powers, instantly want to use them for heroic purposes. Maybe the Hulk, not as much, but overall, most of them have such a noble heart that even though something tragic happens to them when they acquire their abilities, their skills, and they put those things together, Batman from a childhood basically decides he's going to dedicate his life to making sure no one else suffers the way he did. Superman gets his powers and determines that he's going to make sure that he rights wrongs and avenges injustice. You have characters like Captain America who become strong and immediately want to go help and save the world. Fantastic Four go to space, get their powers, they come back, they want to help people instantly. Peter Parker's different. And I think Peter Parker's mostly in his origin stories like a lot of us would be. Peter is unpopular. Peter is picked on. He likes girls who don't even know that he's alive. There are two people who love him, and Uncle Ben and Aunt May live very difficult lives. The world kind of beats Peter Parker down, and seemingly the entire purpose of Peter Parker prior to the spider bite is he's that guy who wishes the world saw him for who he really was, instead of the superficial things that the world values. And so what's so interesting is when Peter gets the spider bite, he kind of acts like I think most of us would. Well, I think most human beings would hope that eventually down the line we would try to use those things for good. I think most of us, if we became superpowered, would originally use it to fix the problems in our own life. If you were someone who was bullied at school and you acquired superpowers, you probably would make sure you took care of that bully who's been dealing with you. If there was a girl you had a huge crush on at school and all of a sudden you became more athletic and you were all of a sudden able to hang with people physically and that's what that girl valued, you'd probably use that to try to impress that girl. If your parents were broke and you were having a difficult life because of gap in money, you'd probably use those things to your financial advantage to try to fix those things. And what's great about Peter is, he's just, in a sense, he's not being evil when he's doing that. He is simply righting what he perceives as the wrongs that have happened to him and his family. And so I think the thing that's so interesting is from the outset, I think we could connect to Peter more on that, because I think for some of us, it is difficult at times to relate to Superman. And that while we want to be like Superman, while we love who Superman is and what he stands for, I think most of us, if we're honest with ourselves, and I think when you're reading a character and you're reading a story, you mainly are honest with yourself. You kind of know if you got Superman's powers, your first instinct might not be, let me go throw on a costume and try to save everybody that I can selflessly. And I think Spider-Man, Peter, that ability that he has early on to go, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna make sure I earn some money to help my family and help myself and to get popular, that makes us connect to him. I think the other part is the fact that Peter's origin is tied to his own mistake. The tragedy that happens, and look, all of us have suffered a tragedy at some point in our lives, maybe the death of a relative, something that happened difficult to you, or you lost something, loss of a loved one, partner cheating on you, whatever it may be, right? You've probably had something that for you was tragic as it happened. But for Peter being the cause of it, I think we relate to that. And hopefully, I pray that no one has made a mistake where it's cost somebody a loved one the way Peter's does. But I think all of us at times understand what it is when you are pursuing something selfishly for yourself. And even if you feel completely justified in doing it, sometimes the people you love the most pay for that. Maybe you were pursuing a promotion at work and you, as a result, made your family feel alienated from you. Maybe in an effort to become more popular, you abandoned the friends that you used to have. Maybe, in dating a new person, you ended up cheating on them because you wanted somebody else more, whatever it may be. And I think all of us at times justify to ourselves that we're okay in what we did and those decisions aren't that bad until you see the consequences of it. Right? You may have had noble intentions. You may have had something where you felt justified or you felt like, hey, man, I was slighted. I'm okay to do this. And then I think all of us at some point, hopefully not to the degree Peter has, have seen those consequences visited on people that we care about. And so I think what is so fascinating with Peter Parker is I think most of us relate to that. Most of us relate to having that ability where something went good for you, you got a little full of yourself. And as a result, people you cared about suffered for that. And I think it just makes him so relatable because Peter's origin is not based in a tragedy that happens to him. It is based in a tragedy that he caused. And I think all of us connect to that, where you could have had all these things at your fingertips at some point. You made a bad decision and it cost someone else. But I think from the outset, that origin is so well designed by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko in creating him, and that it instantly makes you connect with Peter as a character, because at some level, hopefully not to the extreme level that Peter has, you recognize that probably would happen to you if you acquired those powers, that you could see yourself making those decisions. Whereas I think even though they're great characters, I think it is a little difficult to imagine, hey, if I had all the powers in the world, I would instantly use them selflessly to where I'm the person who kind of doesn't benefit from it all, the rest of the world does. As much as we hope would be that person, I think most of us kind of know initially we may not be. We would hope we become that later. And so I think instantly that relatability of Peter Parker makes us connect to him at a deeper level than most people do. I think, secondly, the part that works with Peter Parker so well, and I think this is, again, a critique I have of some of the modern interpretations of Peter Parker, in that, that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man show, and I think some of the critiques of the early Tom Holland movies, Peter's was just kind of presented more like he was just naturally a great person. Right, that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man show that showed like Uncle Ben's death happened prior to him ever being Spider-Man. And so you completely remove the sort of guilt that Peter feels and the role that he played in his uncle's death. And basically Peter's just an amazing human being. And I think that takes away from the character so much. So the second part I think we relate to is that Peter's powers don't solve anything for him, actually. And I think all of us relate to that at a certain level as well. And I think if we're honest with ourselves, there's things in our life where we've pretended that, hey, if I had more money in my pocket, that would solve all my problems. It might solve some. It's not going to solve all. We feel like, hey, if I finally started dating the right person, that would solve all my issues. I think it'll fix a lot of them. It doesn't fix all of them, right? We see people pursue this. If I get the right promotion or get the right job or get a degree or whatever it may be, you kind of present that as, oh, this is the option that will fix everything. And quite frequently, it isn't, right? I think as a married guy with kids, I can't tell you how many times in my own marriage in my life, my wife and I have thought about, man, if I just got a promotion at work, we'd have more money and that would solve our budget issues and take care of our problems. And it's always amazing that no matter how much more you end up making, it kind of seems like life will just similarly demand whatever you got in advance, that it'll kind of demand to see equal amount. You find yourself right back where you started. And so I think the interesting thing with Peter is there is a complex I think most of us feel like if we got this one thing, it would make us happy. And what we notice with Peter and we relate to so deeply is that his superpowers don't fix anything for him. It may make him more confident, but he actually ends up having a more difficult life because of what he acquired than before. Right? He doesn't instantly become popular with girls because, while yes, before they didn't notice him at all because he was a bookworm, even though now he's this superhero who gets some confidence, he now has all the conflicts because being Spider-Man has become the thing that prevents the girls from liking him. He can't connect in serious relationships because Spider-Man takes up so much of his time. And I thought, again, that was such a brilliantly weaved in thing that Lee and Ditko did in those early issues, where his pursuit of Betty Brant and how frequently Spider-Man is the reason that doesn't work. And how even, I thought it was so well done in those early issues where Ned Leeds comes in and Betty kind of turns to Ned Leeds over Spider-Man. And it's a completely flipped on its head version of like Flash Thompson and Liz Allen, where Peter feels like, man, if I was just cool and athletic, Liz would like me instead of Flash. And you flip that to Betty, where he is Spider-Man. And because he's Spider-Man and he has all the things that he thought would solve those issues, she actually turns to someone who is actually a little more like Peter Parker as a result, because Ned is there, he's reliable, and he cares about her, and Peter's always flying off to be Spider-Man. And I think the way you see him struggle with his job, the way you see him struggle with his rent, and I think all of us kind of relate that to the level where you think something will solve all your problems and you realize it doesn't. And I think that makes us get invested with him because we relate to that level as well. I think the third thing that's layered into Peter that I think all of us relate to is perfectly encapsulated in Spider-Man 2. And I think all of us understand this, in that what I loved about the character is Peter kind of always wins but loses. And I thought that was a really cool thing that was layered into it, and that he'd have a huge victory as Spider-Man, causing a huge loss as Peter Parker. He'd have a huge win as Peter Parker, which causes a loss as Spider-Man. And I think that's so cool. And I think Spider-Man 2, there's no character, I think, in a movie. It's one of the most amazing things that Sam Raimi does. I think it should be studied for film for all time, of making you relate and connect to a protagonist the way that you do in the first hour of Spider-Man 2. And that Peter basically at every turn does the right thing. And at every turn he pays for it. And you as an audience, it buys such connection to that character. Because even if you initially start out thinking he's kind of this sad sack loser, when you see him dive into traffic and save two kids about to get hit by a truck, and that loses his job as a pizza delivery guy. Like, dang, that's rough when you see him, have to go stop burglars on his way to go see Mary Jane's play, and he saves people's lives doing that, and then he can't get in the show. And Mary Jane gets mad at him and leaves him for somebody else. And then he instantly has to jump back into being Spider Man. There's just so many moments that are layered in that film where you connect with Peter because he wins but loses. And I think all of us relate to that too. All of us have had times where you pursue one thing and it costs you another. Maybe it was you pursued your career and that cost you friends in your personal life, or maybe you prioritized your personal life and that cost you potential career growth. I think we're always, as people, searching for balance. We're always, as people, trying to find the right range that will help us hit. And hopefully, more times than not, that we hit the right balance, even though we know it'll never fully be perfect. But I think Peter encapsulates that so well in the stories, in that as a character, you relate to him so much because he will get this huge victory and then the other shoe drops. And it's like, man, that sucks. And I think what they used to do so well with him is because they balanced that so well, there was something really cathartic in a Spider-Man comic when he did get a pure victory as a character because you're so bought into what he does. And you're so bought in and relate to him on different levels. And again, none of us are fighting the Green Goblin. None of us are taking on the Rhino or anything like that. But I think all of us have had those obstacles, those challenges, those things that push us, that make us, question what we're doing and how we're doing it, and can we do it better? And you feel like you did all the right things and get all the wrong results. And so I think all of us relate to when you do get those pure victories, those great days that happen. There's a catharsis in that. And I think they've done so well with Spider-Man, at least they used to, prior to the last 30 years, is when Peter does get a pure victory in the comics, when he does win and then goes home and the rent is still paid and the girlfriend hasn't left him. You feel that sense of relief. You feel that catharsis for him of like, man, that's really cool that he got that win. And I think all of that investment makes us care about Peter Parker. And I think that just so much credit belongs to Steve and Stan for what they layered into the character. You have other great creators who worked on him, obviously, like Romita and Conway and so many others who wrote so many great Spider-Man stories. But I think from a character level, that is why we love Peter Parker as much as we do. I think the interesting thing with Peter Parker that I've noticed, and again, I know none of this is 100% true for everybody, but I think the interesting thing is like it's a huge Batman fan and a huge Wolverine fan. While those two characters are very, very popular, if you talk about Batman with certain DC Comics fans, they can't stand him. They think he's overrated. They're sick and tired of DC Comics pushing him so much. Why does he have to be the center of everything? And as a Batman fan, it's kind of annoying when you hear that, but you see so many fans who feel that way, right? So I can't say they're all wrong, right? Same with Wolverine, right? He's my favorite Marvel character, and you'll hear so many X-Men fans like Logan this, Logan that, man, why is it always Logan? They're so tired of him. And again, it's interesting because as a fan, I don't see that angle, but they do. Right. I think you see the same thing with Superman, where there's a lot of people who critique him as boring and kind of Mr. Perfect and stuff like that. Whereas I don't really know anyone who strongly loves comics and strongly hates Peter Parker. He may not be your favorite superhero, but I do think if you just took the average comic book fan and asked them who are your five favorite superheroes, I have to believe that Spider-Man would be in there for like 90% of them. And I just don't see anybody who truly, really, I don't see a lot of people who truly like, oh my gosh, Spider-Man. Unless it's something where the writers have written him as such a sad sack loser, kind of like they have the last decade, where that took away from the character. But I think that to me is really the core tenets of what make him great. He's so relatable because of those three things. And I think all of that goes back to the genesis and the origin point of this character and the creative decisions made really from his first appearance in Amazing Fantasy 15. What's so interesting is that first, I think it's less than 20 pages. That story that's there might be less than 10 in Amazing Fantasy. What Steve and Stan do in such a limited page count to make you instantly connect with this character, it's one of the greatest character creations ever. And obviously, it's paid off 60 something years later. But it is something so impressive how quickly they made you connect with that character, feel an emotional attachment to the character, root for the character. It's a fantastic, fantastic ability that they have as storytellers, and it's something that I think that's what's missing out of comic books now. Is I think when we look at why do characters not connect on the level that Spider-Man used to, because everybody's always trying to create the next Spider-Man, right? They with Kamala Khan was one they pushed. It's like she's a new Peter Parker. We see that all the time. The new Peter Parker, the new Peter Parker. Even Miles Morales, they try to create as the new Peter Parker. And I think because they're trying so hard to make you care about the character, they forget what actually made you like Peter. And it is that relatability. It is those tenets of the character that you connect to. And these newer characters, they're trying to tell you how relatable they are. And they're trying to tell you, oh, you should like this character. Whereas Peter, because of the way they wrote him, you just naturally connected with him. And it's hard for me to say this because as a DC Comics fan, I'd love to make a video saying like Batman's the greatest superhero of all time, and I think he is. But without a doubt, Peter's the most popular character and probably the greatest superhero comic book character because of that, because of how many people love that character. I think there's one thing I'd add to it as well, and this goes, I think, squarely into Steve Ditko, and some say Jack Kirby as well. I think you can kind of throw it in there. The other part is just phenomenal costume design, and I think that's a huge piece of it too. If you want to look at why merch sells and things like that, I do think that's layered into it as well, and that it's almost the perfect superhero costume. I mean, literally from his first appearance, it's almost freaking perfect. Where it's like you don't even really need to mess with it. And they've made some cool variations of the character suit, but in all honesty, it's probably the most perfect character design of any character ever done. It's just a perfect superhero suit from his first appearance on. And I think that obviously helps as well. But those are my thoughts. I thought kind of bring something positive to it, throw something out of why I think Peter Parker is a great character. And again, I say this as a Batman fan. I say this as a Wolverine fan. I love Peter Parker as a character, but he's probably my fourth or fifth favorite superhero. But I do think undeniably he is the one that most of us connect to most as a character for them. Let me know your thoughts down below. If you disagree, if you agree, if you think I'm way off the line on this, that's okay. Right? If this is why you like him, or if you think it's a different reason, let me know. Always great to see you guys' thoughts. I'll never pretend that I'm the guy with all the answers or that I'm right about everything you're wrong. That's not what this is about. I just hope we can have discussion on it and see what you all think below. As always, folks, thank you guys for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless you, and we'll catch you in our next video.